Now, what about the so-called gender pay gap? We're told that women earn 77% of what men earn. That is not true. It's true in the most trivial, irrelevant sense imaginable. But it is not generally true. Now, when I was arguing this on Equal Pay Day, they have an Equal Pay Day every year, I was trying to argue this with somebody, and the person actually believes that what's being complained about is that women are earning 77% of what men earn for doing the same work. That is actually not the claim that the gender pay gap people are making. But like with the war in Iraq, where they were glad to let people think Saddam had a hand in 9/11, even though they didn't have to come out and say that, the gender pay gap people are quite happy for people to believe that the issue is women are earning 77% of what men are earning for doing the same work. That is not the claim. Because in fact, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 already made it illegal for women to earn less for doing the same work. That's not the issue. What they're saying is that if you add up all the hours that women work in all different occupations, and you add up all the hours that men work, and you divide the one into the other, the answer is 77%. So you might ask yourself, well, what kind of jobs do they have? Might that have a little to do with the difference? Do they have different kinds of jobs in general? What are their degrees in? Are women getting degrees in engineering more often than men, or are they getting degrees in education more often than men? Which one pays better? How many hours are they working? Can you believe that's not factored in? That's not even factored in. They say, well, we're dealing with full-time workers. That's an equivocation. Full-time, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, means you work in the vicinity of 40 to 41 hours plus. Or no, I beg your pardon, it's 35 hours now. They now say 35 hours plus means you're working full-time. Well, let's disaggregate those statistics. Let's see how many of those people are working just 35 to 39 hours. 12% of women are working 35 to 39 hours per week. And 5% of men are working 35 to 39. How many are working 41 hours plus? 26% of men are working 41 hours plus. Only 14% of women are working 41 hours plus. So when you factor in the number of hours worked, the so-called 23% pay gap drops immediately to 12%. Just with that one adjustment. Now, how could they not know that, right? That's an obvious lie. Are they that pathetic and uninformed they don't even know the difference in hours worked? They're going to make a big federal case out of this whole thing, and they're not even measuring hours worked? No, I don't believe that. They're obviously lying because they don't care about the facts. They honestly do not care. I remember when I was in academia, year after year, I would say, gosh, I've got all the facts and statistics. What do they care? What they care about is power. They don't care about these statistics. Now, what's interesting is, we still have a 12% pay gap to account for. But you know what institution in the United States, a very prominent institution, also has a 12% gender pay gap? The Obama White House. Now, they're going to go around and harass private employers all day long about having a 12% pay gap. So it was raised to Jay Carney, well, hey, you guys have a 12% pay gap. How do you account for that? And you know what the answer was? Well, women have different jobs in the White House than men. You don't say. That's the point. All right, well, where's the 12% coming from? Again, there are many possible reasons. But one of them, of course, is the difference in effects on men and women of marriage and childbearing. If a woman expects to be out of the labor force for an extended period of time to raise a family, this automatically rules out certain high-paying occupations where your knowledge would be simply out of date by the time you returned. So there are some high-paying types of careers that are immediately ruled out. Moreover, there are other careers where there are a lot of people packing into them because they're so desirable from the point of view of a woman with children, like education or being a secretary, where you can make hours that are very friendly and family-friendly. So this is entirely benign. These are the ways people sort themselves out. And these particular jobs tend to have lower salaries. But this is not any sinister plot to keep women down. Obviously, if women were only earning 77% of what men earned, every business, you know how razor thin profit margins are these days? They would drop every man on the payroll in a second and hire women. I mean, to get a 23% advantage over your competitors? It's so funny how these same people spend all their time talking about how greedy the private sector is. And they don't stop to realize if they were that greedy and there really were a 23% pay gap, there'd be no male employees. They would all have been fired. Hello? So I cover this in that Bernie Sanders is Wrong book. So there's all these statistics and much more analyzing that is all in there. It's important, by the way, to disaggregate statistics to understand what's really going on. It's not enough to say, well, there must be some discrimination because white PhDs are earning more than black PhDs, or Asian PhDs are earning more. Well, the question would be, what are the PhDs in? Are the PhDs in chemistry, in mathematics, and in engineering, as most of the Asian PhDs are, which these are very high-paying fields? Or at least 50% of black PhDs are in education, which is a notoriously low-paying field. Might this account for the disparity we're seeing? Wouldn't that be a better way to try to think about this than to assume there's a deliberate, hate-filled campaign against black PhDs in the United States? Why would that be your automatic default position, to assume the absolute worst of your fellow human beings? Educational differences can also account for later outcomes in life. And here we have an enormous amount of material that we can cover, so I'll keep it as limited as I can. There was a study in the late 1990s. It was the NAEP, I think it was the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Big thing, fully funded. And what it found, that after billions of dollars had been spent on busing programs and so on and on, they found that the average black student who was about to complete his senior year of high school was slightly lower in reading and U.S. history than the average white eighth grader, and was far below the average white eighth grader in math and geography. They saw that the progress between 1977 and 1999 among black students in science was they went from the 8th percentile to the 10th percentile. In the year 2001, they found that the math SAT, on the math SAT, the number of black students scoring 700 or above in the entire country was 700. Whereas Asians, vastly outnumbered by black students, had over 16,000 such students. It was found that even in the early years, beginning in kindergarten, there are disparities. So this is long before there could be other sorts of influences. So for example, the National Center for Educational Statistics found that black students entering kindergarten were already disproportionately testing in the bottom quarter of students in reading, math, and general knowledge. That between 1/3 and 1/2 of black students were testing that low, but only 1/6 of whites. They also noted behavioral disparities requiring discipline, also evident at that early age. And this has sometimes been attributed to racist white teachers who just arbitrarily pick out the black students. But to the contrary, they found that black teachers are even tougher on the black students than the white ones are. This gap persists even when social class is accounted for. Yes, obviously people who are raised in a wealthier environment do better, but that's true of whites also. So the gap is still basically the same. It's only marginally different. And there was a study done of an affluent Cleveland suburb called Shaker Heights, Ohio. This is where the high school spends about 50% more than the national average. And the town's black residents are only slightly below the white residents in terms of education and income levels. In this school, anybody can take advanced placement classes. You can take any class you want. So there was a special effort to get the black students to take the advanced placement classes. 30% of them do, but 87% of the white students do. 2/3 of the city's black students were failing at least one of the Ohio State proficiency tests. This was true only of 1/6 of whites. Over half of whites passed the tests with honors. This was true of 4% of black students. And as Stefan Thernstrom points out, he was my professor at Harvard, that number, 4%, is no higher than the statewide average for blacks, despite the fact that income and educational levels of black families in Shaker Heights were far above those for Ohio as a whole, and children attending integrated school, they were attending integrated schools that were regarded among the best in the state. Well, these are facts. You know, as I say, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.